Hey guys, and welcome back to Studio Time. Yes, we're back. We already saw a video in which I did a really quick tour of the studio, just really quick. But actually things have already changed in the studio since I made that video, because it was a couple of months ago. So I'm standing in front of my Buchla system right here, and I really would like to explain to you more in detail everything about this system. So here we're looking at boat number 1, and I'm just going to zoom in on the top left what we have there. So here we have the 230E, which is an envelope tracker. Right next to it we have a microsound processor made by 1979, but it's actually a more advanced version of the mutable clouds module for Eurorack. After that, we see a quad function generator. So basically attack, decay, plus various different forms of triggering these. And actually you can put 2 in series so you can create more complex envelopes. After that, we see a low pass gate, which is called the quad dynamic manager. It can function as a low pass gate or just as a VCA or just as a leveler. Right next to it, we have this really interesting a sequencer. People might think, oh, it's a radar and we can see where the tanks of the enemy are, but unfortunately it's not that sexy. But it is a very sexy sequencer in which each ring represents triggers, and it also represents various different voltages that you can send out. And on the right you see a couple of rings that you can choose, play at the same time. In this case, 3 rings of a maximum. And it also sends out pulses and gate information. It's a very interesting sequencer to get really unexpected results. When I go down, we see a module that we will see in the other boats as well, which is the 227E, which is a quad mixer with the ability to pan information in quad through your speaker system. So very advanced thinking of Buchla to do this as early as the late 60s. And so for me, it works perfect because I work in quad, so I can actually create really interesting quad patches. So we'll see this module way more in the other boats. Next we go over, we have another dynamic processor, the same as the one we saw above. And to the left, we see another quad function generator, the same as above. Here we see something unique. This is a voltage processor. And in this module, I can take envelope information or other CV information. I can stick it to the input, and I can then control it with my input level and with my output level. And there are breakpoints as well where you can also adjust the level. And it really plays very, very nicely with control voltage information that is coming in. And it gives very interesting, unexpected results, especially if you hook it up with the source of uncertainty, which we're going to get to. Underneath it, we see actually a pretty classic type of module. It does pitch shifting and it does ring modulation. Underneath, we see an old school phaser, and right next to it, we see 2 oscillators that are actually identical, and this is the complex waveform generator. It has a principal oscillator and it has a modulation oscillator, and you can modulate all these different things within this oscillator. It has a timbre, it has a symmetry, it has a high order, it almost functions like a filter, and you can choose, I'm getting a little closer, whether you want soft sync, hard sync, or it's syncing to the MIDI information coming into this module, which I'll talk about later. And with the modulation type, you can pick what you want to modulate. In this case, it's set to timbre, but you can select pitch or amplitude or any combination between the 3. And it creates really bizarre, incredible harmonics. In another video where I actually demonstrate the sound of the Buchla, you'll hear these things in full effect. If we go over here, we see three modules right next to it. The left one is a tactile surface programmer. So it comes with a tactile surface with all kinds of sliders and knobs on it to control things in your Buchla system. And so the left module is for that. And you see all kinds of outputs. Blue is CV information, and red, for instance, is pulse information going out. And it also has, if I move a little closer, it has press, impact, and another control voltage out, the purple one. And it gives you really interesting results to play with this in your patch. Right next, we see actually the most, if you will, standard sequencer that Buchla has. It's four times a maximum, out of the top of my head, 64 steps, and I never got to 64, but that's why I'm not 100% sure. And so it creates pulses out, and it creates a CV out, and you can set it to all kinds of note values, including triplets or dotted, and it has a way to play with the clock information, so it runs faster or it runs slower compared to what comes in MIDI-wise or any other form of clock information. Right next to it, we see the MIDI interface, and there are two in this whole system. And if I zoom in a little bit, you see internal buses A through D. And so it has a communication system within the Buchla system that A through D, whatever comes in MIDI-wise, will be automatically picked up by the oscillators, by the sequencers, by the envelope generators, and also by the low-pass gates. So very, very handy. Right underneath, we see note message buses, pitch, velocity, and note on, note off. And that you can route manually depending on what comes in MIDI-wise, and you can then stick the controllers into the oscillators or anything you want to control. Everything that is blue on the right is or CV information that will listen to control change coming out of your MIDI sequencer, or it is timing information that comes from your clock through MIDI. So if you send MIDI clock to this module, you can pick any division of that MIDI clock that is then being sent out. I have it actually set up. The top six are actually some division of the clock: a whole bar, half a bar, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and 32nd note. And the last blue buses are things like my mod wheel or expression or volume or a few other controllers. If we move down, we see another module that we're going to see way more of, which is a matrix. And it's capable of routing audio, which we see at the top, and it's capable of routing trigger information or CV information at the bottom. And there's an attenuator to determine what the volume will be coming out of the output. So you can use it as a mixer, you can use it as a router, various different things. Right next to it, we see two modules made by 1979. A very interesting one. The right one basically merges one audio input to four out, or four audio ins into one out, which is the top section. And the bottom section does exactly the same, but then for CV. And then you can determine how many steps it will listen to based on a trigger or clock information coming in, and it will or randomly switch between all these different outputs or inputs, or it does it like in order. Very interestingly, to sequence outputs of oscillators and to sequence different forms of control data. Right next to it, we have another module by 1979, which is a voltage generator. This is also based off a mutable module, and I'm blanking on the name, whether it was braids or it was plates, but I forgot what the name was. And basically, it listens to trigger information and it listens to voltage information, and then can you determine like how random that is going to be distributed over various different outputs. It's a very handy module to create levels of uncertainty in your sound. Right next to it are the twisted waveform generators, and I've got two of those as well. Now, this is actually a wavetable synth. So you see green lights and you see red lights. It has two banks of wavetables, and you can select a combination of them with the principal oscillator and with the modulation oscillator. You can modulate it. All the other functions on this module are pretty much similar to the complex waveform generator, including how it's syncing and what you can pick as your modulation destination and how it affects the sound. Again, in a separate video, you will hear the sound of these oscillators. And the last module of rack number one, or boat number one, is a reissue of triple envelope follower. And you see two plugs being plugged in there, and that is actually my Tascam 246 tape machine. But we'll talk separately about that. Boat number two. A lot of different modules compared to the left boat, which we just discussed. So let me just zoom in and let's go to the top. This is a very, very unique module. It's a spectral processor, and I've got two of those, and I'll explain in a minute why I have two of those. But basically, it has a signal in on the bottom, and it divides the frequencies in odd harmonics and even harmonics. You can determine with the gain how loud that signal will be, and you can adjust the pre-emphasis, which is basically it's a a low-pass filter on very high frequencies. But if you turn it all the way open, it's boosting these super high frequencies in a really, really nice way. And then it has like a few outputs. It has an odd output, an all output, and even output. And as you can see, odd and even are both connected, and they go to a mixer. I'll talk about that separately. And then you see all these CV inputs, the gray and black, and you see all the CV outputs, blue and purple. So this module is capable of basically analyzing the sound in odd and even harmonics. And you can adjust these odds and even harmonics with those sliders, which you can just move over with your fingers and change the sound pretty drastically. Now, if that is not enough, it has this really interesting feature, and I'm now going to zoom in even more, where it can actually transfer the performance of one onto the other. And this gives very similar results as what I used to use Metasynth for. So it's proper FFT analysis that is applied from one signal to the other signal, and you get really interesting results by mixing drums and bass into one sound, or high strings and a string pad with high frequencies. Very interesting. So I have two of those because what you can do, you can use a signal coming in on these two on the left box, and basically use the right one to calculate what the result would be if you cross-convolve these sounds. And it does it with a higher precision as if it's done in one module. Then you could also switch this knob on, do it for both, and then one is modulating the other and vice versa, which delivers really interesting results. Right next to it, we see two similar modules that we've seen in the other boats, which is a dynamic manager and a quad function generator. So no extra explanation for that at this point. And here we see another quad voltage processor on the right, which is a reissue of an older model. It does similar things to the one I discussed in boat number one, but it doesn't have the exact precision as the newer digital one. Right next, we see the source of uncertainty. which is a very, very famous module by Buchla, in which you can spit out random control voltages and trigger information based on what comes in, or it does it by itself. This system plus the voltage processors have been wildly copied by many, many different brands for the Eurorack world to deliver something similar. But it still does very interesting things and quite revolutionary thinking that the original design for this module comes from the late 60s, early 70s. Right next to it, we see two or three modules, as you say, which I already discussed. It's another dynamic manager, another attack and decay function generator. And right there, we see another mixer that we also saw in boat number one. So the output of this mixer goes straight into the four inputs of the other mixer. So anything I do on here in quad that I just discussed will come out quad on the other mixer over there. Very amazing feature. Now, if we go down, we see here an oscillator also by 1979. Again, this is a module that is based off one of the mutable oscillators, of which I'm blanking on the name, but it's a really amazing sounding oscillator with various different waveforms and different ways of treating the sound. Right here we have a module that is technically another mixer, which currently is not being stacked, but it's ready to go if I needed to mix some extra signals together. But it also includes the preset manager. And what is really clever is that Buchla came up with a system to use the power rails behind these modules also as a communication line between all the modules and their settings. So any knob you see in my system that is blue will be remembered by the preset manager, and you have 30 presets that you can store. And it's very handy for people that do live performances, but also you can turn one preset into 10 completely different sounding sounds as long as you keep the cables hooked up the same way. And you can just switch between these presets like really quickly. And it's really interesting if you have a patch, but you want to do something different, you just save it up to a new location and you do something completely different with only the blue knobs because those are remembered. Right next to it, we see a mixer very similar to the top mixer of the preset manager. Right next to it, we see another voltage quad processor, but this one is a little bit more advanced than the other one because it's able to calculate the difference coming into input 1 and input 2. And it also has that same breaking point, input level, output level, and you can really create interesting control voltages coming out of that. Right next to it, we see another tactile module that is connected to another surface. We just talked about that. You can play on this surface and control all kinds of parameters in the Buchla system. Right underneath, we have an oscillator that is a reissue from Buchla from an older module, and this delivers really, really solid basic waveforms, but the quality is incredible. So at this point, it's set to a sine wave, and I use it to give the other oscillators a really big bottom end, because if you do a lot with harmonics and wave shaping, you're going to lose some of that low end, and to use one of these oscillators with them is fantastic. Right next to it, which is almost impossible to get it in one shot, but here we see the easel, and this is the modular version of the easel. The easel is a very famous standalone synth made by Buchla and also very well modeled by Arturia in the bundle. It's an incredible synth, and its oscillators, or oscillator, I should say, and the modulation oscillators too, sound quite different from any of the other oscillators made by Buchla. Also, it has two low-pass gates and filter, the same as what I pointed out above, but these sound quite different than the other ones that I've already shown to you. So right to the left of the easel, we have another matrix, which I explained on boat number left. We also see a couple of cables already patched in that are ready to be routed wherever I want them to go. So that concludes boat number 2. And here we go, boat number 3. So I'm going to zoom in and we start again at the top left. And what we see on the top left is another phaser that we already saw in the other boat. Right next to it, we see two very interesting modules. And these are made by Northern Lights Modular. It's a really great company that uses or the source code from Mutable and does something Buchla specific, or it takes existing paddles and do something with it. So on the right, we actually see an H9 made by Eventide, and on the left we see a MIDI controller and then 10 CV inputs and attenuation knobs. So this is a really great effect box to have within your system, stereo in, stereo out. And with the module on the left, you can completely control 10 different parameters on your H9. And the H9 comes with iOS software, for instance. I'm not sure if it's available for Android. And through your phone, you can completely edit every parameter in this box. So incredible sounding multi-effector, actually. Right next to it, we have the triple morphing filter. So this is it's the only filter actually that Buchla makes. And it has 3 inputs, 3 outputs, and it can mix the outputs together. And it's a low-pass filter with resonance. And you can determine the bandwidth of the resonance. You can program 8 filters, filter settings, and then you can sequence through these filter settings. You see a mode here, ABC, and that is to program the individual filter settings for the individual filters that are in there. Right next to it, we see another low-pass gate that I'm actually using as an effect sent at this point. We'll talk about that later. On the right, we see another triple envelope tracker with 3 inputs already attached. We'll talk about that later, what those inputs are. And the one I had on the other side had the Tascam 246 connected to it. This one has the M216 mixer from Tascam connected to it. About that, more later. Here we see 2 beautiful blinds panels where nothing has been put in at this point. Here we see another quad dynamic manager. We see another quad function generator that we talked about, and we see another 2270 quad mixer with the possibility to do panning in surround, and the output of this mixer goes to the input of the mixer over there. That goes into the input of the mixer to the far left. So every boat has a quad mixer. Then we go down, we see another MIDI interface, so no need to explain anything about that. Here we see another mixer. This is a reissue version of the other mixer that we saw in boat number 2. And this one is mixing all the effects together that I have hooked up to this Buchla system. About the effects, another video. Right here, we see 2 oscillators we already discussed on boat number 1, the complex waveform generator, and underneath the twisted waveform generator, 2 of them as well. And again, like boat number 1, they listen to MIDI information coming in. Right next to it, we see another reissue of that really great sounding oscillator. This one is set currently to a sawtooth, and the bottom is set to a pulse width. Again, I use that to create extra color to these other two type of oscillators that Buchla has. Underneath, we see a sequencer, but it's a very interesting one. So it's 16 steps, but you can program each step, how long it takes and what kind of trigger it sends out. And it also has two voltage outputs. So per knob, you can program two control voltages going out. It will sync to MIDI, but you can do this really interesting thing with the knobs in the middle, where you can change the timing of each step that is being triggered. So one step could be a half bar, the next step could be a 16th, the next one could be a 32nd note, or any value in between that is completely randomized. Very interesting sequencer, again, to generate unexpected results. To the left, we see again the two twisted waveform generators. I just talked about that. Here we see another pitch shift module and ring module generator. And right here, we see another matrix. And this matrix is actually mixing the effects returns to two red outputs, and they go into that mixer, as I just explained. You also see two purple cables, and that is CV information coming from the other sequences in boat number 1. So I can patch them into this boat, the oscillators or anything else that I would like. So that rounds up boat number 3. So guys, I really hope that you found it interesting to see my Buchla system and the modules that are in there. But you also see a lot of cables being hooked up, and that is a separate video where I'm going to talk about that, what is connected to this Buchla system and how it works. And you know, as always, leave the comments below what you'd like to know more of, and we'll get to it. But thanks for watching this episode of Studio Time. See you soon.